Start by asking young parents who have kids of, say, preschool up to maybe teenage years, and if I can ask you a question, because it's something that somebody asked me once when I was a young parent, and I'm just curious if it's still pretty much the truth. Have you caught yourself saying things to your kids that you swore you would never say, that your mom and dad had said to you, but you would never say to somebody else? See, it's a weird thing as a young parent. You thought when you were a kid, oh, you're just being hateful. But then when you're a parent yourself, you know that some of the answers that the parents gave you, it was just the truth, right? It wasn't mean-spirited necessarily. Well, it may have been mean-spirited, but it wasn't necessarily mean-spirited. It was just the truth. That there's an answer to the question you're asking, and it's the same answer, and everybody knows the answer. If you're a parent and you tell your kid to go do something, and your kid says, why? What's the answer to that? Because I said so. That's the answer to that. And you don't have to wonder what the answer is. That's just the answer. And I remember being a kid thinking, I will never do that to my kid. And then I did do that to my kid, because then they'll probably do it to their kid, and the circle of life will keep going on. But as I remember as a kid thinking, I would not tell my kid maybe if the answer was no. If the answer was no, hey, can I have this? Well, maybe. I wouldn't do that if the answer was no, because as a kid, I learned that maybe and no was pretty much the same thing. And so I wouldn't do it. But then as a parent, you do it, because you don't want to have the argument. Can I have this? Oh, maybe, a little bit. Let's talk about it. And then you mean a no. No is what you mean, but you don't want to have the argument, so you learn how to be passive-aggressive as a parent on that kind of thing. And then the big one that I swore that I would never do, but I caught myself doing, and it's just because it's the answer. You'd tell your kid to do something, and they'd say, well, that's not fair. And the answer is what? Life's not fair. Life's not fair. And it's the truth, right? It's just the truth. Life's not fair. It's not fair. And the sooner you get that in your head, the better off you're going to be about life. It's not fair. Sometimes you do all the right things and it still goes wrong. Sometimes you do all the wrong things and it works out. Life's not fair. Some of the people who achieve great things don't deserve it, and some of the most deserving people never achieve a thing, and it's not fair. Sometimes disease strikes people down young. Sometimes riches finds an idiot, and it's just not fair. And you'll look at that and scratch your head and wonder how in the world that could have happened. And maybe you'll be tempted to say, that's not fair, but you'll know in your heart that's just how it is. Life's not fair. And so because of that thing, I think it's very hard to do the stuff we talk about at Christmas. It's very hard to have hope. It's very hard to have love. It's very hard to have joy and peace, because life's not fair. It just seems wrong that life works out the way it does. And sometimes we can get so frustrated and discouraged by that we don't really have the life that God has promised to us. We don't really have, that's a case in point. On that thing I was talking to you about earlier, where the shepherds are out in the field, and it says an angel of the Lord appears to them, and the glory of the Lord shone round them, and they were terrified. Which incidentally is consistently and always the reaction people have to angels in the Bible. An angel appears and people were terrified. And that's why I'm always a little skeptical of stories that people try, even books that get published, where a person says they saw an angel and this warm feeling enveloped them, and they just felt like they were so at peace. That's never the reaction people have in the Bible. It always just scares them to death whenever that happens. And they're terrified. But the angel says to them, don't be afraid. I'm bringing you good news that will cause great joy for all people. And this is the promise, right? I'm bringing you good news that's going to cause great joy. And what's that good news and great joy? Well, it's Jesus. Today in the town of David, the Savior's been born to you. He's the Messiah. He's Christ. He's the Lord. And so because of that good news, he's come. There's great joy offered to all people. And it seems like to me, from the very beginning of the Jesus story, this is a promise made to us as Christians. Great joy is available for you. And really, at some level, should be the default setting for us as Christians. That great joy has been offered. And yet, it seems to me that people sometimes don't get there for whatever reason. And you can put on a brave face, You know, you walk in and everything in the world's going wrong. How you doing there, Chuck? Oh, fine. And you'll say that because that's what you do. But you're not fine, and you can put on a brave face. It seems to me that a lot of people, and maybe this time of year really exasperates that, because this might be your first Christmas without somebody in your life who's always been in your life, or it might be your first Christmas when bad financial stuff going on, or health, or who knows what it is, and it's hard to find joy. And then in addition to all that, we have so much rushing that goes with this season. And I admire the guys who get their shopping done really fast. Sarah's our secretary. She says she had all her Christmas shopping done in May. I can't even relate to that at all. How many of you how many of you are totally done with your Christmas shopping? Good. How many of you have not started on your Christmas shopping? Yeah. My people, you guys there at the end. And it's just really hard to it's a rush, right? And a stress. You got to get all this done. I like having all the lights out. I like when people can come and see all of our lights out. But it's a lot to do. It's a lot to get ready, and this year we've been real slow about getting any of that done. It's a lot to get done, to get the tree up, to get the presents all wrapped, to get things done, and Julia does far more of that than I do, and I don't know how she does it. You'd be getting a lot more presents in a Walmart bag if it was up to me to wrap this stuff, and just a lot of stress, you know, in addition to everything else, and what can be missing in all that is joy. But that was what was promised to us. So just so we're all saying the same thing, when I say joy, when I say that word, I mean a feeling that's spirit-given. It's an emotion, and it's spirit-given. It's not happiness, because happiness is completely circumstantial. Happiness happens when something happens. I get a present, I get ice cream, people are kind to me, and I'm happy about that. But joy doesn't depend on something happening to me. Joy is a set of mind, but it should still feel like something. Now you're going to have seasons to grieve. Nothing wrong with that. You shouldn't be laughing at a funeral. It just looks crazy. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't. It's okay to be sad now and again. It's okay to be angry now and again. It's okay. Some of those things are allowed. But joy should be our default setting. That's where we should always come back to. And it should be more common to us to be joyful and to look joyful than to not. And when I see a Christian who clearly doesn't have that, it's not a big reach for me to say, well, maybe there's something wrong spiritually, you know? Now, I'm a guy who has struggled at different times with like an anxiety sickness. I'm not even talking about that. It can happen. You can get into some places where you're just in a terrible state. I'm not arguing about any of that. But even having gone through that, I want you to know that I believe that joy should be kind of our default setting. And I think sometimes we miss that. G.K. Chesterton was an author of a publisher in the turn of the last century, late 1800s, early 1900s, and he wrote a book called Orthodoxy and Orthopraxy, which are both fantastic books, and still worth reading, even though they're 100 years old now. And he had a quote in one of those that it's my favorite quote by him. It's kind of lengthy. I'll take 3 or 4 slides to get through it, so bear with me there. It says, he's talking in an essay. He says, because children have an abounding vitality, because children are in spirit fierce and free, well, therefore they want everything repeated and unchanged. And they'll say things like, do it again, and the grown-up does it again till he's nearly dead. Because for grown-up people, we're not strong enough to exalt in monotony. But perhaps God is strong enough to exalt in monotony. It's possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun. And every evening, do it again to the moon. And it may not be an automatic necessity that makes all the daisies alike. Maybe God makes each daisy, and he's never gotten tired of making them. And this was the part of the quote that is super memorable to me. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy. For we've sinned and grown old, but our Father is younger than us. The poetry of it I like a lot. But that notion that it's my hardness, life's not fair. And so I respond to that by getting hard about certain things. I isolate myself, or I gossip and slander people who hurt me, and I flatter people who I think I want to be on my side. I learn how to manipulate. I learn how to use my anger to get people to give me what I want. I learn how to cheat. And so because life is not fair, I learn how to get ahead of it by sneaky methods. And my sin makes me hard in a way that it doesn't make God hard. And it may be that God is younger than us in a way of thinking. And that God has more joy than we do. See, I think joy was kind of his default setting. Jesus, talking about this, Jesus says, "I've told you all these things so that my joy might be in you, and that your joy might be complete." That we would have the joy of Christ, and that Christ's joy is a complete joy. That it's kind of his default setting. That it's not hard when you look at the Gospels to imagine that Jesus is in a good mood through most of that. I think people who have that picture of God in heaven throwing thunderbolts down have a hard time approaching God, but I'm not sure that's how God presents himself in Scripture. I'm not sure that's how God presents himself, period. Francis de Sales was a Catholic scholar, and he said, the evil one, the devil, is pleased with sadness and melancholy because he himself is sad and melancholy, and he's going to be so for all eternity. Hence, he desires that everyone should be like himself. This notion that we should be down and discouraged and frustrated, that's not a godly impulse at all. It comes from something else. And it's a sign that our enemy is winning when we allow ourselves to fall into that hole. We live kind of in a culture of complaint. I was thinking about this absence of joy and trying to, all week long, looking at different things, trying to see evidence of it. And I picked out 3 or 4 different things that seemed like to me to be evidence of the place that we're at. One is the complaining. Sarcasm and complaining are kind of the default American humor. If you go see a comedian of any sort, almost certainly the whole act is sarcasm and complaining. And it's little riffs on how life's not fair and how silly everybody else is. Boredom amongst people, it seems, is a rampant thing. People, I'm just so tired of having to do this, just so tired of having to do that. Is this all the food that we have in this town? I mean, surely Bedford could have one good restaurant. You know, that's the stuff that you're doing, and you're eating. Somebody cooked for you, and you're complaining about it. And I was told never to do that as a kid. You know, the other thing as a kid I was told is that boredom thing. One thing we never could say, this is not really relating to the sermon, but use this, parents, if you want to, if this is free today. But when we learned not to say it because it would always lead to this lecture. You know, I'm bored. Oh, well, we could fix boredom, they would say. I mean, I had a whole riff on it. You know, we can't solve war in Sudan and pancreatic cancer, but boredom, we can fix boredom today. And then they'd have some god-awful chore for you to do all afternoon. And you wouldn't be bored. It would take care of that right away, but wasn't really what I was asking about. So it doesn't really relate to this. One other thing I see people doing, a lot of escapism. People want to escape into beer or to television. I mean, work hard all day, show up at 7 o'clock at night and turn the TV on and then turn it off at midnight when you go to sleep. And it just waste an evening. And I'm not saying that every evening should be sculpting or something. I mean, I'm not saying every evening can be high activity. It's good to rest too, but very rarely has someone popped up after a long night of television and said, wow, I'm rested, right? It doesn't really have that effect on you. It's just escapism. I don't want to think for the next couple hours. We're stingy compared to previous generations. George Barna has done a lot of research about American church and Christians. And he says in his research, he has found 75% of American Christians cringe when people ask for an offering. And that can be done a bunch of different ways. It could be an offering plate passed, or just somebody calling you on the phone and say, hey, could you give to this or give to that, or the guy with the cardboard sign. It can be that 75% of American Christians cringe when someone asks them to give. That's a curious thing. Now, before I get into that very hard, let me mention that I'm one of the 75%. I don't, it makes me nervous, you know. You did that to me actually a weekend or two. You want to buy this card for the volleyball team? No, I don't want to buy your stupid card. You know, I don't say that, but in my head, it's my money. You can't have any of it, and that's what I'm tempted to do. And I do that with a lot of things. So if you're like that, then I hear you. I mean, I get it. I understand how that is because I've worked hard for this. I don't want to give it up. And I can. And what's interesting to me is that Julia is not like my wife. Is not like that at all. She's very generous. And in fact, for the most part, I have delegated this to her. If somebody asks for money, ask Julia. And it's good news for you if I do that because she'll say yes. I mean, whatever it is, she'll. Yeah. And we've gotten in arguments about that before. Like, shouldn't you ask me before you just give this money away? In fact, that's why we have the policy now where she's the one, because occasionally I would give to something, like, okay, all right, sure, I'll buy it, and then find out that she had bought it too. When I got home, we'd both bought it, and that always made her like deliriously happy, and it would always make me so frustrated, and it would just seem silly to be spending. But here's the thing, and I can defend my line of thinking. I can defend it. It's smart, it's financially prudent, it's safe, it's all. Okay, but which of those two personalities sound more like Jesus? I mean, there's no question, right? It's the one who gives. I mean, when you pray to God, He doesn't do like the passive-aggressive parent. God, please. Well, maybe. And it means no. God doesn't do that. Right? That doesn't mean God doesn't say no sometimes, because He certainly does. But God wants to give good gifts to us. He wants to share His life with us. He wants to share who He is with us. That Jesus was constantly generous. And I'm not. And what I find is that joy and generosity are tied together. You know, the Christmas play and movie and book, Ebenezer Scrooge. It's only when he learns to be generous that he finds joy. And when you watch that, that makes complete sense to all of us. Well, yeah, of course. You can't be a joyful miser. You can't be a joyful, greedy person. I mean, that makes complete sense until you apply it to you, until I apply it to me. And then it's like, well, okay, but hold on. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's necessarily the whole cause of it, but it's part of it. It's the escapism, it's the boredom, it's the complaining. It's a lot of American stuff that we do to avoid having to be Christian. Jesus, not just Jesus, the Bible in several different places says that the joy that's being offered to us is joy that would last even in trial. James chapter 1 says, you consider it pure joy when you go through trials of many kinds because you know the testing of your faith develops perseverance. God's taken you someplace. And you're not going to laugh in the middle of the trial because that's crazy, like I said before. But you can have joy even in that moment because you know it's going to turn out because God's got you. Jesus, speaking in the Sermon on the Mount, says, you're blessed when people insult you or persecute you or falsely say all kinds of evil things against you because of me. He says you should rejoice in those moments, because your great reward in heaven is great. And again, you're not going to laugh in that moment. Nobody enjoys getting insulted. But even in those kinds of moments, God's got you. God's got you, and He's taken you someplace. He's got a plan. God's not quit. And God's got dreams for you and hopes for you and plans for you. And people who have stood up for God's way of thinking have always had it hard. Why? Because life's not fair. It was never, ever promised to be fair. And we can hold on to God even in the harsh times. And we can trust in His promises even in those moments. So let's think again. How do we then get to joy? And I think Jesus, in one of His longest teachings about this topic, gives us some ideas. But the teaching And John, actually, there's 4 Gospels, 4 histories of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John, as a letter, compared to the other 3, sometimes can use more poetic language, how he puts things together, and sometimes how he phrases it and the metaphors he uses and how he loads things up. And it can be kind of hard to read and catch everything he's saying. So as we go through this, think of this like a lot of little one-sentence teachings, but it all goes together. Right? And the key to understanding the big thought that Jesus is making here is to understand how all these different things line up together. And so here we go, and I promise it works that way. Jesus is teaching, and he says, as the Father has loved me, so I've loved you. So remain in my love. And when you read that, don't think about it like his love is conditional. It comes and goes. Think about it more like the sun with the planets all around it. And you're in my orbit now. I love you, and you're in my orbit. He says, stay there, Now, you're not a slave. You can walk out of it if you want to, but this is where you're going to feel the love of God. It feels like something to be in God's orbit. So he says, the Father's loved me, I've loved you, so stay there in that orbit. And then he adds another layer. If you keep my commands, he says, well, you're going to remain in my love. So stay in my orbit. Well, how do I stay in your orbit? Well, you got to keep the commands. Well, I don't know if I can, and that kind of is language. It can make us itch just a little bit. So let's think about that for a second. I did a wedding yesterday, and when I do weddings, I talk to the bride and the groom months ahead of time. I say, well, here's what I'm going to say. I send them a little script of what I'm going to say and give them a chance to edit. And I don't like this, or I do like that. And sometimes often they say, that looks great. I've done a lot of weddings now. I know pretty much what everybody wants. But sometimes they say, no, I don't like this phrase, or I don't like that phrase. Now, when I first started doing weddings, it was still, it's fading very fast. But occasionally, like the oldest vows would say, I promise to love, honor, and obey the other person. And that always got scratched out. I would send it to I don't want that. Now let's take that out. I don't see that working out. Because you picture yourself, if you say that, you're both on the couch, and one of them says to the other, hey, where's my drink? Where's my slippers? I remember working on a hay deal, picking up hay for a farmer, and I was a kid, and he was in his 80s then, and had that kind of a marriage. He did, and we all sat down for lemonade after picking up hay all day long, and he was sitting in a lawn chair under the tree, and the table was right here, and the lemonade pitcher was on the table, and he's sitting beside it. His wife is across the circle, and he gets done drinking, and he shakes his glass, and she hopped up on the other side of the circle and came and poured him lemonade, and it was right there. And I remember as a kid thinking, wow, man, that's the deal I want. And it didn't work out. It didn't work out for me like I thought it would the first time I shook my glass. I thought maybe you got to work into this kind of marriage, and so I explained to her about the farmer, and she just laughed. She didn't see it that way at all. And fill your own glass, she said. And so and that's the picture you got, right? Love, honor, and obey. I'm not going to say that because I have that picture in my head. He'll be expecting me to run across the circle and fill his cup up, and I'm not going to do it. And then you could read that and think that, well, okay, that's what Jesus is doing, right? You got to obey but he's not making those kinds of commands like fill my glass or where's my slippers that's not how Jesus operates. It's not going to be that kind of an arrangement. His commands, God who made the world, this is the truth. This is what truth is. So if you want to live in the truth, then this is what truth is, and it's reality. And by the way, all the commands are just reality. He says, thou shalt not lie. Well, that seems kind of hard, but haven't we seen, all of us in our whole lives, man, when you lie, it makes everything worse. Everything just falls apart when you lie. This lying is not like an arbitrary thing he's saying. It's just the truth. And when you learn reality, when you learn that, you're happier. Okay, so piling this on top of each other. Says, I love you, so remain in my love. Well, how do I do that? Well, you got to obey the commandments. Well, what's that mean? Well, it's the truth, right? Live by the truth. Live by what's reality. Don't live your own reality. Stay with me. Stay in my orbit here again, right? Remain in my love. And then right after that, he says that verse we looked at earlier. I'm telling you this, he says, so that my joy can be in you, and that your joy can be complete. So when I'm in his orbit, right? And I'm living by truth, it should feel like something. It's not just a thinking thing. It should feel like something. And if it doesn't feel like something, well, maybe I'm not in his orbit. Maybe I'm not there like I should be. Well, he goes on. There's more to this. He's still explaining it. He says, my command, okay, here we go. He said, remaining in my commands. Well, what commands? Well, love each other. That's the whole command. He says, just love each other like I've loved you. He says, greater love has no man than this, that he lay his life down for his friends, and you're my friends, he says. Right? So I'm giving you everything. And I want you to remain in my orbit, remain in my love, so you be willing to give, to share, to not just your money, but your time, your energy. I mean, that's what I want you to do. And when you do that, when you love people like I love people, you're going to be in my orbit, and you're going to have my joy. He says, I don't call you slaves. You're not slaves. I don't call you slaves because a servant, he doesn't know his master's business, but I've told you everything. You're my friends, he says. Everything I've learned from the Father, I've told you, and you didn't choose me, I chose you, so that you could go out and bear fruit that's going to last, and do whatever, and that God would do whatever you ask. I mean, that's the plan. That I'm so tight to him that he and I are thinking the same way. We're his friends. He says, come in here, and so all that piles on top of each other. Stay in my orbit. How do I stay in your orbit? Well, you've got to follow my commands. What are your commands? Well, you've got to love each other. Well, that sounds really hard, but Jesus says, I did it first. I loved you. I mean, I gave you everything, so you can do this, and when you do this, you're going to find that joy. And you could reverse that. Well, I don't feel any joy. Well, maybe you're not loving people like you should. Maybe you're not in God's orbit like you should be. I mean all this stuff kind of goes together. And as Christians, joy is almost a thermometer I can look at, and I can see if a person has joy. Well, I mean, how close are they to God? Are they really following him? He says, this is all I want you to do. Just love each other. And the joy is a byproduct of all that. Joy is not circumstantial, like it doesn't depend on the circumstances, but it is conditional. It depends on relationships. How we connect with God, are we in his orbit? How we connect with one another, and where we stand with people. Now, I should make a couple of quick exceptions here, because it's important. You're not called to endure abuse. If you're in an abusive relationship, you're allowed to take a break from that. You need to love everybody. You shouldn't lean on everybody. Some people are just takers. They don't ever give anything back, and I get all that. You're not called to be everybody's best friend. But you are called to love, and you're called to love like Jesus did. And when you do that, the promise is that you get his joy. So at our church, what's the easiest ways to get started? At Mount Pleasant, the easiest ways to get started is two things. Small groups of some sort. You can find me afterward. You can find Josh afterward. You can talk to the information desk. One of our leaders will help you figure it out. Get connected with a few other people. Or some sort of a ministry. Some sort of a ministry team. Help make beds, for the kids. We were doing that Matthew 11:28 project. Get involved doing that. Or teaching guys downstairs, teaching a class for the little guys. Or helping one of the church ministries in town that we support, Life Food Pantry or something like that. Just commit, get involved. Do small group or ministry. Just plug yourself in. When you do that, you're doing what Jesus asked, and I think that's going to do as much for you feeling joy as anything else. Now, again, as an illustration of this thing, as I'm asking you to do that, I'm aware that 75% of you are cringing inside. Right? As I'm asking you to do it, according to statistics, national averages, 75% of you are already making excuses why you can't do that. Or you just tune me out. You have no intention of following up on that because it's just, you're too busy, too much going on, too many things happening, too much stuff. You just can't. If you ponder it even for 2 seconds, I don't have time. It'd be all that extra driving. It's one more night a week, and we've already got this and this and this and this and this scheduled. There's just no time in the world to do these sorts of things. I'm just going to keep my life like it is. Thank you very much. Appreciate your concern, but I'm doing just fine. And I know that because that's how life works. And again, if I was sitting where you're sitting, I might be tempted to do the very same thing because it's very easy to do that because you can imagine how hard it would be to take that step. And again, most of us learn how to protect ourselves because life's not fair. We learn how to guard ourselves and guard our time and guard our energy and guard our stuff because life's not fair and we don't want to get too far out there. So to illustrate that and what I want you to do, I was doing another wedding. It's been a few years ago, and you might know the person. If you do, don't tease them very hard, because I thought what they said was really cool, and it stuck in my head. So if you can deduce who it is, fine. Just don't tease them. But we're talking ahead of time, and most time ahead of the weddings, I'm with the groom. Me and the groom are hanging out there because we walk in together usually in most weddings, and he's a little nervous, which is not unusual because most grooms are. Most of the grooms have been getting teased all day long by all their groomsmen, all their supposed best friends. Every old man that has come in to talk to the groom that whole day has made the same joke. Hey, it's not too late to run. And he's heard that joke about a dozen times. And he's been told by other people, wow, your wife is really nervous about this. Be good to her. You be sweet today. And so he's just nervous he's going to make some stupid mistake, and she's going to be ticked off, and he's going to look. And then you get the whole issue of being in front of the crowd too. Not everybody digs that. And so usually the groom is nervous. Now normally they don't admit it. Like you're backstage with the groom and he's doing this, and you say, man, you doing all right? Yeah, I'm fine. And you're not, right? They're not fine, so usually to put the groom at ease, I try to tell the groom the same thing I tell all the grooms. No one's watching you anyway. I mean, they really aren't. As long as you don't throw up on yourself, no one's going to notice you at all. And some of the guys, oh great, one more thing to worry about, throwing up. But no. I mean, unless you just fall completely flat on the ground, you're going to be fine. No one's going to notice you. They're not looking at you. They're looking at her. You'll be fine. And don't be stressed. But this guy, he tells me, I'm a little nervous, which usually they don't do. Normally grooms don't do that. And I'm a little nervous. I say, well, really, once we get rolling here, and this is the thing with weddings, it goes by so fast. You spend all this time getting everything ready, and then when it actually happens, you just blow right through it, and it's going to be a blur to you. In fact, the hard thing is to slow down and appreciate it. So I told him, I said, listen, it really, once we get started, and he said, it's like sports. He said, I used to, in sports, before the game would start, I'd just be so nervous, getting ready, my stomach would hurt, and I get a headache and everything else, but then the ball would go up, and I would forget all that. I said, yeah, it's just like that. It's just like that. We're going to get started. The ball's going to go up, and it'll just play the game, and it'll be fine. Okay. Well, this deal, right, with small groups and stuff like that. You imagine, one more night. You imagine I've got to talk to people. You imagine looking awkward. You imagine feeling uncomfortable. But then when the ball goes up, it just sort of works itself out. And you're part of all this. And you're starting to open up a little bit. And God's there with you. And your heart starts to change. And this is the goal. And you can do this. You absolutely can. And I know it's a frightening thing to think about all the different possibilities. But it's not about you anyway. As long as you don't throw up on yourself, no one's even going to notice that you've jumped in there. Tim Hansel is an author that I like. He says pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. We can't avoid pain, but we can avoid joy. And I think some of the things we do to avoid pain actually take our joy away too. We know life's not fair, so we keep ourselves isolated and separated, and then that robs our joy. Jesus went the other direction. Hebrews says, for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross, scorning its shame, sitting down at the right hand of God. When it came down to a choice between serving us or taking care of himself, Jesus served us. And he did it because of the joy set before him. It wasn't joyful in that moment. I mean, he's not, pretending like everything's okay there on the cross. Hey, Jesus, how you doing up there? Fine. I mean, it's not like that, right? I mean, he's real honest about how awful it is. He's real honest about how miserable it is. He doesn't hide that. But he puts himself through it because he wants to take care of us more than he wants to take care of himself. For the joy set before him, he gives and he gives and he gives. Even in death, he gives, and his life is 100% joy. Always love. And as Christians, I want that for you. We have a thing in the back of the room. If it's your first week here or have not been here for some time, we have this thing in the back of the room. It says everyone in lights if it's all lit up. And starting there around Labor Day, we encouraged our people to share their faith. Either talk about Jesus or talk about your testimony or talk about what God's doing in your life. Just start talking about it. Because the gospel is for everyone. That's what it all spells out, and we want to remember that. It's for everybody. That Jesus came to save everybody. And our world is so broken, and life's not fair, and a lot of people are just weighed down by it. And there's no hope or love or joy or peace in their lives at all. But the gospel's for everybody. And there's good news and great joy that any one of us can access if we just tie ourselves to God and get in his orbit. And that promise is for you. It's for everybody in here. It's for everybody watching online. It's for everybody who lives and breathes on this world. God has not forgotten you. And any one of you that want to tie yourself to him and get back in his orbit, that door is always open. So at the end of our service, we're going to have some guys in the front praying on both sides and they're in the back. And if you want to go pray with them, do. And if you have a decision to make about drawing close to God, talk to them and they'll help you walk through that decision. If you're not ready to do that yet, that's a little intimidating. Pray where you're at. Pray with the people who you came with and just say, hey, I want to get closer to God. Take advantage of the morning. And especially if God is kind of knocking on your heart there a little bit, to draw close to him. Don't cringe when he asks you to give. Not on this, because there's joy on the other side. Let me pray for you.